and welcome to Bursting the Bubble, fight against Hispanic women's stereotypes. I'm Harrison Gerard.
I'm Shannon Rogers. I'm Karen Main. I'm Shia Willis. I'm Anna Kate Howard. I'm Megan Corey. I'm Katie Faber.
And we have partnered with the Women's Center through our GC2Y Sex and Resistance class to bring this collaborative event to you all today. Thank you for being here.
Leading here today, we hope to gain a new perspective on Hispanic women's struggles, especially since this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. Today we will begin with a reading from Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed, a novel edited by Ceresia J. Fennell. In this novel, 15 individual stories are shared encompassing the Latinx experience. Today, Ms. Mayweather will be doing a read-along and we will be the discussion. After discussion, we'll be talking about a novel titled The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls, written by Mona Elton, which further discusses stereotypes of women. We will be discussing examples of stereotypes of women and specifically Hispanic women must abide by to be seen as normal in our society and what happens when women defy against these social norms. After discussing the novel, we'll have a couple of discussion questions for Ms. Mayweather and for all of you. With that being said, thank you guys for being here. Now, we would like to introduce our speaker, Ms. Nadirah Mayweather. She is director of the Cultural Center here at the Hub. So she represents underrepresented students here at GCSU. So she has a lot of knowledge about our topic that we're going to be speaking on today. And so if you'd like to talk more about what you do here at the Cultural Center, feel free to. But if not, we're going to hop right into the reading. And also, we have a few copies of the text actually going to be reading. If any of you want to follow along, I'll pass them up to you.
Well, good morning. And as I said, I am Nadirah Mayweather, director of the Cultural Center, and I'm super excited about you being here today. Each of you should have received a little postcard that sort of talks about what we do in the Cultural Center, but real briefly, we're kind of the student-facing diversity office on campus. We know that diversity and inclusion is not a specific responsibility of one office. It is a university thing that we all should be committed to. But in our office here specifically, we do programming around different heritages. And so since it is Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm super excited that we can partner with this GC2Y class and to specifically highlight the voices of Latinx women that have engaged in some resistance of their own. And so the essay that we're sharing today does come from a text that we've chosen to highlight this year, which is called Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed. We'll talk about this a little bit when they get into the questions, but one huge part of resistance is allowing your own voice to be heard. And sometimes what happens is that with certain cultures and certain heritages, the voices get silenced or someone else is doing the storytelling. And we all know that sometimes even from our own life experiences, if someone else tells your story, they don't always get it right, right? How many of you have had someone recount a story for you and they don't always get it right? I know it's happened to me before. So a part of a huge thing that we do here is to try and honor people's own voices and make sure that they can be heard so that people can understand the experience of those individuals. So there are some things that they'll have later where a couple of copies of this book can be something given away. And we will have future events this month where copies can be given away. And we're hoping to have the editor come on October 20th. So I hope that you all will mark your calendars. But it is a phenomenal book. I wish that we had time to talk about every single story. But in general, most of the essays cover a wide range of topics, right? Everything from adoption to sexuality to understanding different parts of your identities and learning what those identities were and being proud of them, what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a mom, what it means not to be any of those things and just sort of find their place. But they're all written very, very well, and they give each author the opportunity to tell their own stories, and in a way that is not so tamed, which I love, right? Sometimes we try and tame and tone down what people have to say, and in this work with these 15 essays, it is not toned down at all. It's them telling their own story. So we're going to take some time. How many of you miss being read to? Anybody? I see the enthusiasm in the back, so keep that enthusiasm up, okay? I'm going to do my best to not just be a dull voice, but to hopefully highlight what Jasmine Mendez, who is the author of this particular passage, has to say. So this is Alaya by Jasmine Mendez, and she's talking about a story, a play actually called A Raisin in the Sun. Has anyone ever seen A Raisin in the Sun? I've seen it multiple times, the movie and the play. It is one of my favorites, so this also spoke out to me. But Lorraine Hansberry, in her own right, was also a resistance figure in the things that she wrote, and the plays that she contributed to society. And this is just this one young woman's experience with that play and with her own resistance in life. All right, so without further ado, Alaya. Damn my eggs, damn all the eggs that ever was. My brother stood up and slammed his hand down. A plate of eggs flew off the dining table on stage. Goosebumps scattered across my arms and neck. My hands squeezed the armrest. Ben, my older brother, was becoming a star right in front of my eyes. It was the closing night of the high school fall play, A Raisin in the Sun, and Ben was playing Walter, the lead role. On stage, Ben was a giant. The spotlight followed him from stage right to stage left. His voice filled the room, and when he shouted, it echoed like a loud crack of thunder. The audience held their breath when he spoke. I had never admired or envied my brother more than I did that night. Ben was a sophomore at the time, and Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun was the first time he'd been cast as the lead. I had seen Ben play minor characters in other performances, but this was the first time I felt starstruck by his talent. It didn't matter how many times I sat in the audience and watched the play, 3 times counting. The moment he screamed and brushed the plate of eggs off the table always made my heart clench like a fist. Ben was not a yeller in real life. He never showed this kind of rage. To see him embody a character in this way made me shiver with excitement and a little fear. I didn't know Ben was capable of raising his voice or becoming violent in any way. In fact, I always saw him as the opposite, a pushover. Although I was 2 years younger than him, I was always bossing him around. Actually, as I was my father's daughter, I was always bossing everyone around. But Ben was the one person I knew who would always listen and follow along. If I told him to help me with something, he willingly obliged, head down without a fuss. Those nights, on that stage, though Ben was no longer my docile big brother, he was, without a doubt, the stubborn, tragic hero of Hansberry's play. In his body, in his voice, and perhaps somewhere even deep inside himself, he became Walter the Younger. As I watched Ben dazzle us with his portrayal of Walter, all I wanted was to learn how to become an actress as captivating as Ben. I wanted to use my voice and body to make an audience forget who I really was. I wanted, more than anything, to become someone other than me. Growing up, everyone had always made me feel different, and not in a good way. As a military brat, I was used to moving around and changing schools every 3 or 4 years. So far, we had lived in Alabama, Louisiana, Germany, and now Tennessee, and it was always the same. I always stood out for being the new, mixed girl with the good hair who speaks Spanish. Since elementary school, my teachers would gasp when Spanish rolled off my tongue like water during parent-teacher conferences that I was forced to translate. My classmates used to pressure me to say something in Spanish during lunch or recess, as if I were some circus sideshow. There weren't any Dominicans living in any of the places we ever lived, and I had no connection to or understanding of what it meant to be a Black Dominican. My Black friends always said I wasn't Black, or at least not Black enough. And to me, Black meant African American. And everyone in my family, including Mommy and Poppy, always made it clear that we were not African American. We were Dominican, and those were 2 very different things. By the time we moved to Tennessee and I started middle school, the isolation and confusion I felt around my identity only seemed to get worse. I would have done almost anything to fit in and be liked because I just wanted to feel less alone. I wanted to be someone the world could love and understand. I wanted to be seen, but I also wanted to be someone less Dominican, less different, less Latina, less Black. I wanted to be enough. Once I saw how much attention Ben received after his performance, I decided theater was the only way. Act 1. 8th grade, Clarksville, Tennessee, character, Rosa Parks. My first first real spotlight came in the spring of my 8th grade year. At the beginning of each day after the Pledge of Allegiance, Assistant Principal Mrs. Jones would sigh into the microphone and make hurried announcements over the speakers. One morning in January, while popping my 2-ton U.S. history book onto my desk, Ms. Jones' zombie-like voice caught my attention. Students, our drama teacher, Mr. Cunningham, is seeking performers for the Black History Month celebration in February. If you are interested, we invite you to join Mr. Cunningham in his classroom after school this Thursday to learn more. Make it a great day or not, the choice is yours. Kingwood Knights forever. Hurrah, hurrah. It was only Monday, but I already wanted it to be Thursday. I kept remembering Ben's performance, A Raisin in the Sun. I remember the explosive applause that shook the auditorium when he took a bow. And I could still feel the heat of the stage lights on my skin from where I sat close to the front. I wanted to feel that post-performance rush again, and the Black History Month celebration was my chance. Although auditions weren't required, I was determined to show Mr. Cunningham what I could do. Monday after school, I rushed into Ben's room. Listen, you have to give me some pointers on acting and performance. I'm trying out for the Black History Month performance. Ben peered over his thick Coke bottle glasses and smiled. Oh, what you want to know? How do I make sure my voice is loud? Or like, what should I do with my hands and my body? Do I just stand there and move or what? Okay, slow down, one thing at a time. Ben got up from the bed and stood in front of me. Stand like someone is pulling a string from the top of your head. Relax your knees, keep your hands still. Take a few breaths. Deep breaths from here. This is your diaphragm and one of the actor's most important tools. Ben placed his hand under my breastbone. Imagine you're filling up a balloon right here in your diaphragm. Your breath control is always first. If you can control your breath, you can control your voice, your emotions, your character. The core of everything is the breath. I did as I was told. I felt my shoulders relax and my feet ground into the floor beneath me. For once, it was Ben who was telling me what to do, and I actually really liked it. When Thursday rolled around, I practically skipped to Miss Cunningham's classroom. My hands were sweaty and my heart thumped like a conga during a fast moving game. Mr. Cunningham was one of the 3 Black teachers at Kingwood Middle School. He was bald with deep brown skin and blue-rimmed glasses. He had a thin goatee and a small round belly that rubbed against his belt buckle when he walked. Though I'd never had him as a teacher, I had seen Mr. Cunningham in the halls almost every day, and he always smiled at me and said hello. His energy and joy were contagious. No matter the time of day, he strutted through the halls, swishing his hips and bopping his head as if there was an upbeat pop song playing on loop somewhere in his mind. Mr. Cunningham started the meeting by explaining that the Black History Month celebration would consist of 3 Negro spirituals, 1 modern dance number, and a series of short monologues. He said not everyone would have to perform a monologue, but everyone would have to sing the songs and be part of the group dance. If you were not comfortable with singing or dancing, Mr. Cunningham said, wiping his glasses with a purple handkerchief, then I suggest you leave now. He slipped his glasses back on and waited for a moment. I looked around the room. A couple of students rustled nervously in their seats, but no one got up to leave. Excellent. So before we get into singing and dancing, who's interested in performing a monologue? My hands and 3 others shot up like bolts of lightning. Great. You all come over here and take a look at the monologues on this tape. Decide which one you want to do and be sure you want to do it, because there's no change in your mind once you pick it. I rushed to the table at the front of the room. Me and 3 other students began to grab the neatly organized sheets of paper. Each monologue had the face of a famous African American in a short biography. After a few minutes of shuffling through the monologues and feeling uncertain, Mr. Cunningham walked up and stood next to me. He smiled and reorganized the messy papers with his name. How beautiful. Tell me your name again. I'm Jasmine. Jasmine. Yes, that's right. I'm so glad you came today. Have I ever told you that I love your curls? They're absolutely beautiful. He gently patted one of the curls on my back and shook his head as if amazed by what my hair could do. So I want to pause right there just to help you think about, in this moment, she's trying out for a monologue and her hair is being called out as something for her to just think about. So just put a little asterisk right there to remember when we're done, about her hair. I could feel my face getting hot. Most people made fun of my curls, saying my hair was too big and too wild, and didn't I know about relaxers and a hot comb? It was embarrassing to have a teacher notice and comment on the one part of me I always hated the most. I changed the subject. Thanks. Can you help me choose something? I'm not sure what monologue I want to do. He showed me two different monologues. One was in the voice of Wilma Rudolph, the Olympic gold medalist and track star born and raised in Clarksville, Tennessee. We had learned about her every year in our social studies classes and even visited the museum they had built in her honor near her gravesite. Wilma Rudolph was Clarksville's only real claim to fame. The other monologue was in the voice of Rosa Parks. Almost every year since I started school, I had learned about Rosa Parks during Black History Month. Both Rosa Parks and I had been born in Alabama. Both she and I believed in fighting for what was right. We both wanted to be seen and heard. Her strength had always inspired me. As I read her monologue, I knew that I wanted to be heard. This one, I want to do this one. I handed Mr. Cunningham the monologue. He seemed surprised. His lips quivered a little as he smiled at me. Well, all right, if you think you can play the Rosa Parks, then so do I. For the next 3 months, I memorized, rehearsed, and learned my part. When Ben wasn't busy with homework or learning lines for his own upcoming show, he quizzed me on mine. I recited my lines in the halls between classes. I recited my lines in the shower, on the school bus, before bed, and anytime I was alone. I learned all I could about Rosa Parks and was determined to be the best Rosa Parks anyone had ever seen. Mommy and Poppy were excited about my performance because they enjoyed any opportunity to brag about their children. Even though Poppy always insisted theater was a great hobby and not to be considered for a real character. He and Mommy never missed any of our performances. Mommy was so thrilled for me when she even helped me put together my costume. I showed her a picture of Rosa Parks, and she helped me find a pink dress in her closet that looked similar. She let me borrow some of her costume jewelry and bought me new pantyhose and a slip to wear underneath. Mr. Cunningham had arranged for us to perform at a nursing home before the in-school performance, telling us it would be good practice because these audience members were always kind and welcoming. When we arrived at the Clarksville Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation Center that chilly February morning, we were greeted by one of the center's directors, a tall Black woman with long braids and bright pink lips. I am so thrilled you all are here, she said, clapping her hands together and ushering us to the front of the hall where we would perform. There wasn't a stage, but we were provided a microphone and a wide open space. While we set up, the 50 residents had joined us, chatted and enjoyed sugar-free jello, oatmeal cookies, and punch. Our 3 Negro spirituals and our modern dance were a success. The audience members swayed and hummed and clapped right along with us. After each applause, my body buzzed like the drum of a church bell after it's been rung. The monologues were the last act of our performance. As I walked up to the mic, I could feel the fake pearl necklace on my chest rising and falling with heavy breath. I wiped my sweaty palms on the drop waist fuchsia dress Mommy had let me borrow. I filled up my balloon diaphragm with as much air as I could get, closed and opened my eyes, and began. The monologue spilled forth from my lips. Eyes moved with me from left to right as I walked across the stage and retold the story of how I was tired after work and didn't want to move to the back of the bus. My voice seemed to hit the back wall and bounce into my chest. It made my whole body vibrate. I spoke clearly and with conviction, and when it was over, everyone applauded and cheered. Someone in the back even yelled, "I know that's right, girl." My heart thumped hard and my knees shook. Like a little kid on her birthday opening every gift I had wished for, I knew this was my shining moment. At the end of our performance, an older Black woman in a wheelchair rolled up next to me. As I grabbed a couple of cookies from the snack table, she wrapped her arm around my waist. She hugged me close to her. Her paisley print dress with a lace collar brushed against my thigh. She smelled like rose soap and peppermint. Her bony fingers pressed into my hips. "You remind me of my granddaughter," she said, nestling her head between my ribs. "You got some real talent, young lady." And I hope you keep at it. The world needs more strong Black girls like yourself. She smiled wide. Her cherry lips trembled and her dentures shifted in and out of place. Thank you, ma'am, but actually, I'm not Black. I'm Latina. Oh, she sat back surprised. Well, you look Black to me. She chuckled to herself and took a bite of her food. So another pause. I just want you to think about after that magical moment that she just had, what that correspondence may have felt like between her and the LGBT. I wasn't sure what else to say to her because all my life I had been told I was not Black. I convinced myself she had said what she said because my performance as Rosa Parks was so convincing. She believed I was Rosa Parks that morning. I was so convincing as Rosa Parks, she believed I was a Black woman. I took what she said as a compliment and didn't really think about it anymore after that. The adrenaline continued to pump through me as other elders from the nursing home congratulated me. It was probably one of the happiest moments of my life. And the only thing that would have made it better was if Ben had been there to see it too. Act 2, time, senior year, place, San Antonio, Texas, character, Alice. I spent the rest of my teenage years chasing the thrill of the spotlight. Right at the end of my 8th grade year, the Army transferred Poppy to Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas. In San Antonio, like in Clarksville, there weren't any other Dominicans around me, or any other Black Latinx students either, at least none that I knew of. The students at my high school, like at most any other high school, grouped themselves either by race and ethnicity or by interest, hobbies, or sports. Because my main interest was theater, this is where I found most of my friends. My theater friends may not have shared my culture or ethnicity, but we did enjoy playing improv games and quoting lines from our favorite movies. Drama class and the other theater became my sanctuary, my safe space, the one place where I felt I really belonged. I wasn't singled out or different because I was part of an ensemble, a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. We worked together to portray characters and build a world the audience could connect with, and the performance was the most important thing. Once those curtains opened and the lights came up, where my family was from and how or why I spoke Spanish didn't matter. No one in the audience even had to know I was Dominican. I could become anyone or anything I wanted, and the audience had to believe it. I didn't have to explain who or what I was when I was on stage. When I performed, I was not invisible. I was not different, and I could not be ignored. I took up the space I deserved and became my best self. I auditioned for every play and spent all my free time on the theater because I wanted to hold that feeling in my body and in my bones as often as I could. Watching Ben score leading roles over and over again made me believe that with enough talent, anybody could play any role. I didn't know anything about typecasting or colorblind casting or what it was or wasn't possible. I truly believe that if Ben could get roles traditionally played by white actors, then so could I. It was talent that mattered most of all, wasn't it? But I quickly learned this was not true. My drama teacher, the Schumans, as the drama kids called them because they functioned like one homogeneous being, taught me a lot about theater and performance. But the most sobering lesson I learned from that was that it didn't matter how talented I thought I was or how talented anyone said I was, I would never fit the part. At least not the parts I wanted to play. So I also want to put a pin right there. This next act is mostly just talking about her not fitting the part of being the girl next door, or being the ideal part to be cast. And because of time, I am going to skip ahead just a little bit so that we can make sure that we have the time. So she tried out for a lot of other roles, and every other time her directors would always say, "You're going to get it. You're going to be a shoo-in for the lead." And every time that she would check the casting list for the plays, she would never get the lead role. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 183, middle of the page. So finally, they decide to do a play, Alice in Wonderland. They added that play to their list of plays that they were going to do for the year. And they kept hyping her up that she was going to get it. And so middle of the page, she says, but they were right. The morning after auditions, when I rushed to the black box and looked up at the cast list, the first name at the top of the page was mine, Alice, Jasmine Rosario. I squealed. I hopped up and down. Mr. Schumann came up to me, squeezed my shoulder. Congrats, you earned it, kid. Now don't disappoint us. He shuffled himself to the green room to fill his coffee mug. I deflated a little. Why would he say that? Had I ever disappointed him in the past? Acting was serious business for me, and failing was not an option. I shrugged his comment off and shimmied to class. I thought of how the theater would fill with hundreds of audience members just to see me, a Latina, playing the part of one of the most famous white girls in children's literature. I felt like I had finally won. I felt like my talent had finally surpassed my looks, and now anything was possible. As soon as I arrived at the theater that afternoon, the congratulations began. Shamika, my best friend, gave me a bear hug. Can you believe it? You're Alice, and I'm the Queen of Hearts. This is going to be amazing. I know, I'm excited too. I can't wait. I hugged her again as we ran down the aisle, giddy with excitement. I wanted to run home right then and there, call Ben, who was away at college, and tell him the good news. I knew he, of all people, would be happiest for me. When Mrs. Schumann came in through the backstage door, her blonde hair swayed side to side, and her kitten heels clicked across the wooden stage. She smiled at us and said congratulations. She plopped a red crate filled with scripts on the stage and told us to grab one. I quickly pulled a script out of the crate, sat down in the first row, pulled a highlighter out of my backpack, and started highlighting my lines. The room hummed with whispers and laughter as everyone flipped through their scripts, read lines aloud, and rustled through their bags for pencils and highlighters. I didn't talk to anyone. I focused only on the script in my hands and what it would take for me to embody the naive and lovable Alice. My highlighter lit up the pages of my script with the bright yellow glow of the summer sun. Miss Schumann ran her hands through her bangs and cleared her throat. Okay, everyone, settle down. Before we get started with our read-through today, I want to talk a little bit about some of the fun and interesting design choices Mr. Schumann and I have made for this production. It's going to be super fun and really big. I thought my heart would leap out of my chest. I was desperate to know what the production ideas for this show were. Would there be a live band? Would we get elaborate costumes or wild props? How would my last and most important performance of my high school career be remembered forever? My legs bobbed up and down as I waited to hear what Mr. Schumann had to say. So, what we were thinking is that this play will be performed in black light. Your costumes, props, and accessories will be white or painted with black light paint so the audience can see your silhouette and actions. It will be fanciful and trippy like Alice in Wonderland is meant to be. Miss Schumann giggled. Clearly, she thought this was an ingenious idea. I wasn't sure how to feel. This was not the big reveal I hoped it would be. Next to me, Shamika folded her arms across her chest and spoke without raising her hand. What you're saying is no one will be able to see our faces, just our costumes and props, right? Well, you won't be completely in the dark. The audience will see you. For example, we envision Alice wearing white gloves and a white apron and white shoes so her movements will really pop on stage. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable that she had chosen my character to sing aloud. Shamika leaned over and whispered in my ear, "They're putting us in black light because they want to try and hide the fact that all the lead characters are black. We can't get nothing around here." Shamika sucked her teeth and stuffed her script onto her backpack. All right, so I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. She did end up doing a play, but this is just a moment where finally, after all of these plays that she had done in high school, she gets her big break, and still, her director says, I hope you do a good job." And then also they change the visibility so that their skin and their faces can be seen. So the next is Act 3, and she moves to college. She's in Houston, Texas. And this is where it kind of comes full circle, where she's going to play Ruth Younger, which is a part of the Raisin in the Sun play, which her brother had played at the opening. So I'm going to move through. The opening of the essay just sort of talks about how her brother doesn't do much playing in college as he used to. He likes to do more spoken poetry because it's a chance for him to see his voice portrayed as opposed to the writers of plays and casting their voices. So if you are reading along, I'm going to be at 187. Her brother invited her to come to a spoken word poetry night. So that night, we each performed our own words in front of a smoky, crowded bar filled with hoops, hollers, cheers, and jeers. Ben advanced to the final round, but I did not. Ben placed second, and I was just in awe of him then as I was the night I saw him as Walter Younger. After collecting his small cash prize and gift bag, a sweaty, out-of-breath Ben slumped down next to me in the booth. That was awesome, bro. Congrats. Yeah, it was dope. Why haven't you been doing any shows lately, Ben? He shrugged and wiped his sweaty brow. Honestly, I really think I like slam better than theater. In slam, I get to perform the work I want to perform, not someone else's words, you know? It's kind of nice. I don't have to pretend to be anyone else. I don't have to work so hard to fit into who someone else wants me to be. I'm not just some minstrel show for white folks. I don't have to dance when they say dance. Ben's words caught me by surprise. Perhaps something had happened to him in college that he was too embarrassed to talk about. Mommy and Poppy had been complaining about Ben's defiance and behavior lately, the mismanagement of his scholarship stipend, excessive traffic fines, and how irresponsible he was for always getting stopped by the cops. But a part of us all knew it wasn't always Ben's fault. Ben was a Black man living in Dallas, Texas, wasn't he? And perhaps that constant stress had finally worn him down. Or maybe it was Poppy's unrealistic expectation that Ben be the perfect firstborn son. Whatever it was clear that traditional theater was no longer filling Ben's spirit the way it once had. It seemed like he was finally trying to pave his own path forward. After the holidays, feeling inspired by Ben but not ready to abandon theater myself, I joined a group of Black and Latinx students in my theater department who decided to band together to try to make a change. We wanted our voices to be heard. We wanted plays written by and for people like us to be produced on campus. We called ourselves the Unheard Voices, and a group of us even submitted a proposal to the department to produce A Raisin in the Sun. It was shocking to all of us that in the entire 75-year history of the university, this canonical play had never been produced. To our surprise and delight, the panel of professors accepted our proposal. I auditioned and was cast as Ruth Younger Walter Lee Younger's wife. Ruth was a challenging role for me. I didn't know anything about being a married woman or beginning pregnant. I was only 20 at the time and hadn't lived through any real heartache or loss. But I remembered Ben's performance of Walter when he was only 15. And if Ben could play Walter as a teen, then surely I could play Ruth. I learned my lines and executed my blocking and my emotional beats. I worked every day trying to find what connected me to Ruth. But everything I did felt technical and detached from Ruth's humanity. One night during a particularly difficult rehearsal, I had a breakdown in the green room. I had spent most of the rehearsal calling for lines and missing my cues. I didn't understand Ruth's character, motivation, needs, and I was tired of pretending, tired of struggling. I was in full-on sob mode when Angela, the assistant director, sat next to me on the musty green room couch and gave me a tissue. Hey girl, what's wrong? I don't know. I'm just not feeling it tonight. I don't know if I can do this. I am exhausted. But I know this has to be good. I know we have to show them that we can do this. But I'm so tired, I sniffled. You think we're doing this for them? Angela waved wildly at the air. Girl, we're doing this for us. We're not doing it for them. You are more like Ruth than you realize. Don't you think Ruth had dreams? Don't you think Ruth was tired of chasing those dreams? You have dreams. You are tired. Use your tired on stage. I know you can do it. I wouldn't have cast you in this part otherwise. That night, during the last stretch of rehearsal, I used my tired. During the scene where Ruth has to explain to Mama that she considered getting an abortion because she's pregnant and afraid, I broke down and cried. I cried for myself. I cried for Ruth Younger. I cried for all the Black women in the world like us who have dreams that sometimes feel too far out of reach. I cried for all the things I have lost, my sense of self, my identity, my self-confidence, just to get to this moment. And I vowed to never let them go again. That night and every other night on stage after that, I was able to become Ruth because I knew I already was her, just like Ben, who at age 15 had already become Walter. I didn't know it then, but playing Ruth would in fact be one of the last leading roles in a traditional play I would ever have. After graduating, I would spend a couple of years attempting to make a name for myself in the local Houston theater scene, but I would quickly become disillusioned. Even in a city as diverse as Houston, the theater world failed to produce plays by people who looked like me. Even the local Black theater company would never cast me in plays because I don't think I was the kind of Black actress they wanted. I stopped auditioning for plays, and even though I taught middle school theater for 2 short years, I would become disheartened by that as well. I grieved this loss like heartbreak from a first love. It ached in my bones and manifested itself in nightmares of forgetting my lines on stage. Eventually, I pursued poetry and spoken word because the open mic stage was a far kinder, gentler place than the theater world would ever be. Writing my own poems and performing them in front of a crowd fueled and empowered me the way acting once had. But it would take several years for me to get there. An opening night of A Raisin in the Sun, I wasn't thinking about the future or the past or who I wasn't or wouldn't become. When the lights came up on the first scene, I was Jasmine Rosario playing Ruth Younger, and I was ready. When I looked out into the audience and saw Ben, he smiled at me like the proud big brother he was. And I knew this was my moment to shine, and that's exactly what I did. I flitted about the stage in a pink velvet robe as Ruth, as me, as every Black woman who has finally decided to take up space. After the curtain call, I rushed out of the theater to find my family. Mommy handed me a big bouquet of red and purple flowers, wildflowers, and Papa patted me on the back. Felicidades, Mommy said as she brushed a few curls off my forehead. Gracias. I smiled so hard I thought my cheeks would split open. Ben came over to me and opened his arms wide. We had come full circle, back to the play that started it all, except this time Ben had been watching me. I wrapped my arms around him and squeezed him tight. His voice cracked as he whispered in my ear, "You did it, sis, you did it." We took a deep breath in together. I remembered his advice to me almost a decade before. The core of everything is the breath. I took a deep breath as I remembered the relentless projections, countless auditions, and grueling hours of rehearsal it took to become Rosa and Alice and eventually Ruth. These roles gave me the thick skin and strength I would need to pursue all my future goals and dreams, both in and outside of the artistic world. I took a deep breath because I knew then that I was and have always good enough. Questions prepared, but I just want you to take a few moments just to think about her experience. And even though she is not on a huge political stage, she had resistance in her own way to her life experiences. And I also want you to think about the transition from when she was in middle school and she told the elderly lady that she wasn't Black. And you hear it towards the end of the story, like her identifying that way. So just the identity transitions that she went through and what it took for her. Thank you.
So before we get to our questions, we're going to be tying this back to a novel called The 7 Necessary Moments for Women Girls. This novel is this novel is written by Mama Elseway and discusses 7 different sins. The author uses the word sin to describe 7 topics that being lesbian and woman you must abide by, or society will judge you or look at you as less. These sins are anger, attention, profanity, ambition, power, violence, and lust. With each of these sins comes a way in which a woman must present herself.
For example, anger. If a woman gets angry and lets it show, she is seen as crazy, versus if a man gets angry, it is seen as normal and masculine. If a Hispanic woman gets angry, she is seen as a fiery Latino and is seen as something she cannot control. What this book means in terms of Hispanic resistance is that women are held, to a higher standard than men, and women of color are held to a higher standard than that of a white woman. It is exceptionally challenging for a woman to fit the mold of a patriarchal society, yet alone of Hispanic world. We have a couple examples of excerpts from this book that help further show stereotypes women must abide by and how these relate to Hispanic women and ways in which their struggles differentiate between other women.
So in one of Hathaway's chapters, Profanity, she's reminded of how the intersection of class, race, and gender are used to police women's language. Bringing up Cardi B, who is also a Black Dominican woman like Jasmine in Wild Times. Cardi dislodged Taylor Swift, who is a poster girl for white and blonde respectable femininity. In many ways, she was criticized for how she talked, how she dressed, and more, but she clapped back. She stated that patriarchy works hard to censor the realness via the politics of respectability, a concept coined by the Harvard professor of Afro-American Studies, Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. It refers to the ways members of marginalized groups police each other in an attempt to replicate mainstream values as a way to achieve acceptance. It is an especially sharp tool used against women of marginalized groups, and realness is all about what Cardi B shows. Women are supposed to be less than, not too much, quiet, modest, and so much more that doesn't attract attention. When it comes to being a woman, and especially a Latina woman, you're expected to do the most. When a Hispanic woman uses profanity to her advantage, similarly to anger, she is labeled in a certain way. Stereotypical identities that have spurred from the idea that Hispanic and Latina women are hot-tempered, promiscuous, and sexy, including the fiery Latina phrase. This stems from Hispanic women being sexualized and eroticized in popular programming and in the entertainment industry as a whole.
So in the story Alaya, Jasmine kind of feels invisible throughout her years in theater class. She wasn't like really recognized for her work, or she wasn't given leads that she deserved, as talented as she was. She even stated that she wanted to be white because that white girl always got the leads that she wanted. Which brings us to the topic about underrepresentation in the film industry. In Attention, Chapter 7 of 7 Necessary Sins, a statistic is stated that found that out of the top 100 films of 2017, 67 of them did not have a single Latinx woman character. It is believed that there's more to it than just that statistic. Patriarchy uses attention as a reward for those who anoints as worthy: the white, the thin, the cisgender, the feminine, and the able-bodied. Patriarchy pays attention to those who fall within its conventional notions of beauty, as stated in the text. And the norm of beauty is a white one. Even today, in mainstream film, Latina women are underrepresented. Attention is only given to those who fit the beauty standard of our patriarchal society. A Hispanic woman does not fit that mold. The beauty culture in Latin America focuses on having a specific blend of Hispanic and European features, including lightly tanned skin, long styled hair, an hourglass figure, large light eyes, and plump lips. These requirements alienate most of the community and cause a further divide, which stereotypes these women even more.
In Chapter 5, Power, Altahawe discusses how women are denied power and when they finally attain it. They are knocked down. Hispanic women are rarely ever given power, and when they are, society has much to say about it. Altahawe uses the example that Brazil might have once elected a female president, but it remains solidly patriarchal. Just 15% of Brazil's federal and state legislators are women. Although Brazil made an advancement that the United States has yet to make, the president was impeached from office by the corruption-tainted Senate because she was deemed unfit. Most of the public agreed that women do not belong in a place of power, and stood by the Senate's decision. This relates to the story Alaya, because Jasmine was finally cast as the lead in one of the plays she auditioned for. She finally had power over the stage. When the director decides to make the play trippy by using black light and the black light paint, her power gets stripped away. After overcoming this, she finally gets the lead in a different play years later, thus regaining her power. Women's power gets taken away every day, especially Hispanic women. A fight for equal power is something women around the world have always stood up for, but because Hispanic women are seen as less than white women, their fight is incredibly more challenging. Now we are open to questions for Ms. Mayweather and for y'all as well.
So I'll open up the first question, for the audience. In the story of Lila, the main character Jasmine participates in a seasonal musical. When she landed the lead role, the directors decided they want the lights turned off and the leads painted in the neon color, the glow or the black light paint. So they are still seen for the trippy scenes for the show. What do you think Jasmine was thinking during this moment?
Don't be afraid to answer.
Discussion time now. If it were you, how would you feel?
Yes, Kelly.
I would feel like they were trying to hide who I actually was and not didn't want anybody to see like who I was or what I was. They just wanted to see like it was just known.
Any other thoughts?
I just want to make it. And the thing that frequently happens is like on the outset, moves like this seem like they are innocent, right? It's just the director who is trying to add some sort of fun element to a play. But that's what we call systematic type things, where you do things and they're underhanded when you do them. But the outcome is that a whole population of people gets to not be seen in their full glory if they were, if it hadn't been any other scenario. So sometimes that's why it's hard to pinpoint when things are happening against women or happening against Latino women in particular, because they seem innocent, right? They seem innocent on the outset, but it's hard to identify it. It's hard to prove that there was malicious intent on the aim of the directors, and there might not have been. Sometimes people really honestly don't know, but that doesn't take away from Jasmine's experience because it was done to her. So just want you all to recognize that sometimes things happen and it's not blatantly obvious that it's discrimination or it's doing something to be against someone. It seems innocent, but when you think about how it actually impacts that population of people, it becomes cruel and sometimes very bad.
I think especially because they had like passed her up for so long, right? Like if she had always been the lead and all of, the Black students had always been the lead characters, and then they did this, that's different, right? But it's the fact that everybody was kind of waiting for their moment in the spotlight, and then they finally get it, it's done in this really like kind of acting way.
Another question based on what you kind of pinpointed earlier in the story when Mr. Cunningham complimented her on her hair before she like immediately changed the subject. I think this is for you and everybody. Like, what is the importance of young Hispanic and Black women embracing their hair?
So it's funny that this highlights here, but hair is a huge part of culture, especially, hair is a part of Black culture, right? Like how many of you that identify with Black can say like, you're always something to do with your hair. Maybe the stereotype of being blonde or straight versus curly, like, so hair in all cultures is something that is a very sensitive topic because sometimes it is used to discriminate against people. I think especially in Black and brown cultures, hair is what separates and it's what defines us because it makes us totally different from White culture. And so sometimes it's harder to accept that aspect of yourself. Especially when the images that you see in the media show this one stereotype of what is beautiful and what is acceptable. And when your hair doesn't fit into that, it makes you feel less beautiful, less acceptable, right? Unless you come from a background where you're taught, no, love yourself, love who you are, love the way that you look, love the way that you were created. You're always trying to do something to your hair to make it be more of the mainstream. So for instance, she talked about hot combs and relaxers. There are products in the market that make your hair tame, like we're talking about wild tongues can't be tamed. Wild hair can't be tamed, right? Like this notion of the fact that our hair is wild and kinky and curly and isn't straight, which is the acceptable way. So there are many young women who grow up with this inferiority complex because they don't look like what mainstream media says is beautiful and is the right way. And so for her to be this young middle school student navigating this moment where her hair is always talked about, having to get over that and her acting ability, it's just an extra layer of something that we have to think about all the time. To give you some examples, there are elementary schools right now that have rules in place about how your hair can be, and some of those rules include not having braids, not having certain colored hair. But if that's a part of your culture, and in an elementary school, told you that you can't be that way, then that's from an early age already setting a standard for what is beautiful, what is acceptable, right? Public schools can't get away with it as much now, but private schools still have rules in place about what is acceptable hair. Like, what does my hair have to do with my ability to learn, or my ability to succeed, or to say I'm not representing this institution of education in the best way? My hair, like the follicles that come out of my head. And so it sounds crazy, but these are fights that have been fought for years, with the majority telling Black and brown girls what they should look like, and then in response, Black and brown girls owning who they are and resisting, right? Fighting back to say, no, this is who I am, and this is also a form of beauty. So hair is a huge topic in many cultures, but especially amongst Black and brown, and we've been told for so long that your hair isn't the beautiful type. Thoughts about that? Like, just out of curiosity, growing up, how many of you, if your hair was kinky or curly or wasn't laying down, you were told it doesn't look good? Right, there's a whole market for straighteners. Why? Because we all think that our hair has to fit a certain way. So, it's interesting.
I know for my private school, our hair couldn't touch the collars that we had. So that was fun.
I mean, and these are things, like, it's hair, like it shouldn't define us, but it does, and it's used against multiple identities of people, and it sickens me, but it's still happening very much on a daily basis.
All right, so how can students like with these privileged identities, help support those who are?
Okay, how can students with privileged identities help support those who are marginalized and not let similar situations occur like this character has gone on through our campus?
From the
Yeah. See something like the teacher or something is going to like correct me. Or like say with the other groups listening, but like back to back.
And that's a rule of thumb for everything, right? If something's going wrong, you have a platform to say it. What else? Okay, I know it's almost lunchtime. You just sat through like 30 pages with things to read. I'll just echo, just give people a voice to tell their own stories, right? Never assume you know how a person feels, or you assume you know about an experience. And the more we can allow underrepresented voices to be heard, I think that's important, right? So expand your genre of reading. Read things like Wild Tones Can't Be Tamed, or the books that are shared in your classroom, because those open your eyes and your mindset to the experiences of other people, so that you can get the story right, so that you can understand exactly what they're going through from their own words. So anytime we can give voice to marginalized populations that have not previously had voice, I think it's very important to make sure that our whole story is as diverse as possible, and as colored as possible, and as unique as possible, because that's the reality of the world that we live in. There is no single perspective. So anytime you can open yourself up to multiple perspectives and to hear it straight from the mouths of the people living it, I think that's something.
And after that, to attend events like this, when you're not the one organizing them, right? Because without people showing up at things and wanting to hear these voices, right? Like you can't actually, it's hard to elevate voices no one's listening.
100%. 100%.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Nadirah, for reading the book to us. And I still can't remember. So we will go over to the survey. And, like we said at the beginning, we're gonna be giving away 2 books, Wild Tongues. If you would like to participate, the first 2 people that enter, will win them. So get on it now. And, thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Are you gonna announce someone else?
Yeah, if whenever she announces the name, just raise your hand, I'll look at you.
Laura. Nate. My bad.
It's a good read, I promise, but this was just one of the stories. There's one in there called Invisible that I highly recommend reading next. Just to give you a synopsis of it, it's a wife who's married, to a family that's like white things back. All of the things that she goes through with them refusing to recognize who she is and what she believes. Like, for an example, she tells them, she proclaims she never wanted to have kids. Mother-in-law makes a baby blanket for her. And it's like, she's like, that's just like the biggest sign of not recognizing. But that one is really good for them, though. If you get the copy of the book, read Invisible Man, it'll outrage you, but it'll also just be like.
Thank you guys. Okay. Yeah, we should do that now before, well, there's like good slides, so yeah.